Welcome to the second hour on this Monday night. It's time now for what I've been waiting for all weekend, and she's finally back with us. It's Dr. Sherona Rawat on our Monday Motivation. Good evening, Doctor. How are you?
Good evening, Dees. Absolutely wonderful. Lovely to be here again.
Fantastic. I know last week we had a bit of an issue, but I'm glad we're back tonight. I've been looking forward to this the whole weekend. It's almost like, when the first show, it's almost we like family now. That's how it is. So
yes.
It's so good to have you back, and we get to engage with you. And I think tonight's quite an important one that we're discussing. COVID-19. I was just telling earlier that we go to bed thinking about COVID-19. We wake up thinking about COVID-19. It's just been part of our lives now.
Absolutely. And that is what's so important, that we understand, what's really going on.
Yeah.
Today's show being about the numbers and stuff, to really get to understand, what they mean and how do they affect our lives, basically.
I'm glad that we're talking about this because, a lot of people, still, you look at these numbers and it's so confusing. What is really going on? And it puts fear in you when you see over 500,000 now infected with the COVID-19. It does put fear in a lot of people out there. But hopefully tonight we're going to just try and give them a bit of hope and better understanding of what this all means.
Absolutely. One of the reasons why I wanted to chat about this was because I noticed how obsessed people are about the numbers. You get WhatsApp messages all the time, saying there's this number and this province is up by this number and that's a hotspot and it's a hotspot. And the hotspot situation is actually... It's a serious thing, but it's a little bit amusing as well. Because basically if you're testing somewhere, you're going to find cases, So it reminds me of an analogy that, if the Oreo company had to drop, 750,000 boxes of Oreo over Benoni, would we then call Benoni the cookie-eating hotspot of South Africa?
That would be nice. I'd love to be there when they're dropping those. So there's this hotspot shifting from spot to spot, I think, is also causing people a lot of confusion because no one really understands what's going on with that and what does that mean. So that's why I thought, this is a really, really important topic to discuss and to kind of sift out for people and help people understand what it is that you really need to know about this, about the numbers, and what actually is irrelevant. And so it's leading to a lot of misconceptions, but also it's leading to errors in judgment, because people are looking at some of these numbers, or looking at some of the stats, or looking at some of the hotspots that keep getting pointed out, and start thinking that, okay, either I'm in a hotspot, I better be careful for the moment, or hey, we are cool now, everything is okay, we're not the hotspot anymore, so we can just carry on with, kind of normal living. Yes.
And and I think that's just adding pandemic. So I think people need to understand about it, and that the analogy about in relationship with the cookies is extremely important because that's exactly how it is. If there's certain areas that they're actually counting or they're testing at, it's becoming known as a hotspot, but it does not make sense because if you were at the entire South Africa at one shot, and certain areas showed more than others, then we can say those are hotspots. You see, but if you are only testing in one spot and not in the other, you cannot call that spot a hotspot. So I think that's where there's a lot of confusion and things. I think it's the layperson understanding of the numbers and things, and the expert. And from what I've seen, and I did mention to you, yesterday, I'm not sure if we're allowed to even say this, but
yes.
With carte blanche, where the statistician said that the numbers don't work for him. They can't understand what's happening with the numbers. So, if you're looking at somebody who is an expert at this thing, that these numbers are, all over the place, then what's the layperson going to make out of this? So, that's why I thought that this is important to work on, and for people to understand a little bit, because we do a lot of research and kind of like academic work.
Yes.
And so we know what the parameters are, and we know what the kind of criteria is. But the average person out there does not really. So that's why I wanted to cover some of these things. You see, to look at things like, reliability and validity. Are those figures reliable? Are they valid? Like, for example, that example I mentioned of the cookies, And everybody is not a statistician, obviously. So we need to know, what to leave to the experts. What numbers are really meant for like scientific study and that kind of thing. What affects us directly? So what about which numbers actually affect us directly? And what of the relevant information that we gather from this is going to be used in making our own personal decisions regarding our actions and how to bring the preventative measures within our own lives. You see, so this is what the clear aim is of today's segment. I hope that sounds good.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I look forward to tonight's discussion with Dr. Sherona Rawat on Monday Motivation. We're talking all about the COVID-19 numbers, what it means, how to dissect it, and how it will affect you, a person listening to us around the country tonight. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Right, we're going to get into that. If you want to engage with us, you can drop through your message on the WhatsApp line on 071-613-7803. When we come back, we start with Monday Motivation with Dr. Sherona Rawat.
Nothing but the best. The official drive with Lloyd Paul.
Good afternoon to Hafiza. Congratulations, you're the winner of the Lotus FM Connection call. You are 1,000 Rand richer at the moment. How do you feel?
Thank you so much.
Let's see if we got Rihanna online. We've been asked to call you. Your friend Hafiza said that we need to give you a quick shout because you are a connection. So just by answering the call, you've made her 1,000 Rand richer. So she's sitting with 2,000 Rand in the kitty right now.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so happy.
Hi, is that Raisa?
Yes.
Hafiza sitting at 3,000 Rand.
Oh, wow. Yes, hi, this is Anya.
Do you know Hafiza?
Yes.
And just by answering the call right now, you've made Hafiza 4,000 Rand richer. Good afternoon. Can I speak to Naseem, please?
Good afternoon, speaking.
Man, you got some very tight connections because every one of them picked up their call. Congratulations, because thanks to all your connections, you walk away with 5,000 Rand.
Thank you so much. I'm more than happy, more than truly excited.
Lotus FM. Yeah. Share the experience. The Night Cafe on Lotus FM.
Welcome back to the show. It's the Night Cafe Monday Motivation with Dr. Sherona Rawat. And tonight we're talking about all the numbers and what it means to you with regards to the COVID-19. Welcome back, Doctor. Right, so currently, as I mentioned earlier, we are sitting at just over 500,000 of a total of new cases in the country. And the increase of 8,195 cases from that are infected. So I want to find out, Doctor, how do we break down these numbers? What should we focus on?
Okay, so basically one of the important things, or a few of the important things that people need to remember when it comes to statistics and research is that first, these statistics, by its name itself, is a complicated arena, right? There's lots of checks and balances that need to be adhered to. We've got ethical considerations, and when it comes to healthcare, we've got clinical implications, which ethical is, that we're not hurting anybody, and clinical is how do we apply it in the situation in order to help people. And in that light, we need to make sure that our research questions, it means what the questions we are asking, they need to be highly specific and they need to be valid and reliable. So they need to be something that is important to that scenario, right? And that's something that then can be translated into something practical. So basically the narrower and more condensed the study, which means the more kind of defined the question, the better it is. In that light, when we doing research, we normally note our limitations. So if I have to say, I'm dropping 750,000 boxes of Oreos over Benoni, I would have to say that in that light, that was all that we were able to do. I was not able to drop any boxes over the rest of Gauteng. You see, so in order to make that information valid, I have to put the limitations and mention the limitations to the gathering of my information.
Yes.
So research needs to be very, very detailed and meticulous. It needs to be objective, right? And we need to identify important factors. So, for example, what kind of socioeconomic climate is there in Benoni? If I drop 750,000 boxes of Oreos down there, what kind of individual is likely to pick up a box? You see, so we've got to look at those things as well because that's going to affect the figures. So when we're looking at the COVID-19 situation, we need to look at, what numbers are being recorded? Is it PUI, which is people under investigation, or people awaiting COVID-19 test results, or like suspected COVID-19 positive patients, but they haven't been tested? Basically what we need is people who are COVID-19 positive, tested, and then end up with the symptoms and the results. And if should they die, then that's been counted as a death. Right. So that's basically what we're looking at. But a lot of times, all the numbers are quite skewed, and they become like one big jumble, and people don't understand what they mean. So let's look at what it is. What does this mean to you? So I think the most important thing that the individual out there needs to look at is the casualty or the fatality rate. Right.
Is that the most important one you should look at, Doctor? The casualties and the fatalities.
The fatality rate, basically, which is the number of people who have died from the disease divided by the total number of people who were infected with it.
Okay.
Right. It makes perfect sense. Because that's going to tell us how serious the situation really is. Right. Right. For example, here in South Africa, there is something that they call excess deaths, not only here in South Africa, everywhere they call it excess deaths. But in the other moment in South Africa, if you look at the excess deaths for, I think the period is May to July of this year compared to all the other years before, there's 17,090 excess deaths. So which means that 17,090 more deaths than there were last year in this period or any time before that. Right. And if we look at some of the stats, we're looking at 59% more deaths from natural causes. Right. So COVID-19 is still a little bit of, I would say, a surprise to most people. We don't know the real details. We don't really have the crux of the matter. The people are still doing experiments and tests and investigating and that kind of thing. So the data out there is quite mixed. And so there's a lot of unknowns. So when we're looking at these kinds of things, we need to look at numbers that make sense to us, that make a difference. So if there is 17,000 and something more deaths than there were last year or the year before, then we know that something is going on, and there is something that's quite serious. If we look at the fatality rate and we see what's the number of deaths compared to the number of people that have been infected, then we know how high is the infection rate in this thing, or the mortality rate actually, not really the infection, mortality rate. So that is important because it tells us how many people are dying from this. And if we look at the fact that there's been 59% more deaths of natural causes, all of a sudden this year, compared to years before, then it's again telling us that the pandemic is serious, that there are fatalities happening, that the numbers are quite high, which, as you said, is like over 500,000 at the moment. But those are more the numbers that we need to look at. But it is more complicated than that, because if we actually look at the deaths that have happened, and we look at some of the, like, for example, there's a rapid decrease in unnatural deaths. Due to the lockdown and the restrictions on alcohol. So if we look at that, now that would affect that 17,090 deaths.
So that figures that they're showing is not just for COVID-19. It's for other causes as well, natural causes or drinking under the influence or deaths under the influence of alcohol. All of those kind of things play a role in that figure.
Well, that's the excess death figure.
Excess.
Right.
Okay, that's the excess.
So, now
right, I'm with you.
When we're looking at this over 500,000 deaths, we need to look at, these over 500,000 deaths, how many of them were positive COVID-19 came to the cases? Right. And that's what we are looking at, not whether people were under investigation or whether people were suspected COVID. And that's not only looking at the data that's actually being stated. So we are not even counting individuals like in the townships and rural areas that may be passing away that are not being counted. And then, as I said, if we look at it more complicated with the fact that there was a reduction of deaths during this period in regard to unnatural deaths because of the restriction on alcohol. So we think that 17,090 could easily be much higher than that, the excess deaths that we're talking about.
Wow.
So you getting what I mean?
Wow.
So can you see how complicated stats can be if they're not looked at in the right way?
It's boggling.
Exactly.
It really is. It is boggling. And a lot of people, and I think when they look at these figures, they get the fear that people get in. I know my parents are the exact same. And I don't blame them because, my dad literally watches the news from morning till night on this whole COVID-19. And the figures start popping up on the screen is like,
Yes.
He wants to lock himself away and never come out of the house.
Right.
But I guess I understand where you're coming from, and I'm glad you broke down what this whole figures mean and how you have to dissect it.
Right. Because, look, the concern with this is that, as I said, the excess deaths are not counted into the figure, right? And then the higher number of tests you do, obviously the greater likelihood of identifying infection. So the more tests you do, the more likely you're going to find more people that are infected, if you get what I mean, right? And the total number of tests conducted in a country will affect its numbers. So what's happening now is they're starting to then compare country to country. Right? So many countries don't have the resources to test a lot. So what's happening is they're saying some countries have less numbers and some countries have more numbers. But in actual fact, that country may be testing less. So then obviously end up with less numbers. So you can't really compare that stats one onto the other. But that's what's happening out there. And again, people are panicking, saying, wow, we're doing so bad, other people doing better. And that kind of thing that's going on. And it's not just here. It's across the world that that's happening. So you've got to look at that. And then you've got to look at also, the hospital admissions. If you look at the country, you look at the province, the differences in the criteria, the differences in methods of counting, the stats used. For example, SA versus Italy. If you look at Italy and the number of elderly individuals that passed in Italy. And you look at South Africa's population, which is very different from the Italian population. So you can see how it's like comparing apples with oranges, really speaking. It's not the same thing. So those are the things that are very big concerns, because that is what confuses individuals. You see? So, I mean, the spikes also, for example, like I told you, with that bologna example, right? I mean, if we drop those packs of biscuits, there's going to be a spike there, right?
Yes.
If we suddenly drop another lot somewhere in the cake, there's going to be a spike there, right? So the spikes actually are just where people are testing. So it is a misconstrued to say that if we have to look at all those things, that's a hot spot and that's a hot spot, because we hear a lot of that. Overpot is a hot spot, West Coast is a hot spot.
That's right.
Yeah, we hear this all the time, and everybody's thinking, okay, what's going on? We're in the hotspot, what's going to happen? And it's panicking everybody. And I think that is also a big error in judgment in individuals releasing those kinds of information, because there's certain information that obviously the lay person is not going to understand, but obviously if you put a spin on it, it also then leads to panic, right? So the effects of this misunderstanding, what it does, it causes fear. So people become very afraid. So people don't want to go near hospitals, they don't want to go near clinics, right? So people are dying of the virus at home. Now what happens with that? That affects the numbers, right? Because that's now not documented. Then there are other people who are dying of different diseases at home because they're afraid to go to the hospital. And there's enough examples of that happening as well. So can you see how the numbers then become skewed? Right.
It does, yeah. Now I'm getting a much clearer picture of how these numbers all work now.
Right.
You've actually given us a better transparency, I can tell you, in terms of the numbers.
Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad, because that was the purpose of it. So basically, we are not really sure when we're looking at all these numbers and things, exactly what they are meaning, unless you actually fine-tune and dig deep and look at certain questions that you want answered. That is why I said the important thing to know is what's the fatality rate, because that affects a normal man on the street, right? It gives them information to understand, okay, let's see how fatal is this thing. Okay, the second thing is, how is that going to affect my decision-making? Okay, so I understand that hotspots technically are not really hotspots, as they insinuated to be, that they are testing in those areas, which means I still got to be careful in the other areas that I visit that are not marked as hotspots.
Yes.
Right? So this is where it starts affecting the decision making, because individuals need to understand, don't worry too much about those things. What about the fact that there's over 500,000 people that were infected with this illness, right? Out of that, most of them do survive, right? A small percentage pass away, right? Unfortunately, with this illness, the stats and the figures and the details are not there as to really what's the pathway, that causes one person to die from it and another not to. Because there is no pattern. There's no pattern that anybody has picked up. It's not age. It's not any of the major illnesses. There are people with hectic illnesses that have survived, and there's people with nothing.
Look at that. Yes, this virus is so confusing. It's literally playing with our minds. That's what it's doing.
Absolutely.
Because it's as you said, a healthy person gets it, and a person that's got underlying conditions gets it, but then recovers.
Yes.
It's how do you make out this disease, this virus? How do you make it out? It's just so difficult.
Absolutely. So there's no real way of predicting it. And sadly, that's something everybody needs to accept and understand. So they need to understand that the hotspot thing, don't worry about it too much, right? The fatality rate, we know about it, right? The unpredictability is very high on this illness. So we still have to be cautious. There is no vaccine and there is no there is a treatment, but they're still fine-tuning the treatment, let me put it that way. So they're still working on that thing. But the fact of the matter is we have to be careful, we have to be cautious, because there's no way of predicting how one person from another is going to react.
Bottom line, just follow all the rules and regulations of having your personal protective gear on, your masks, sanitize your hands, stay away from large crowds. So you just follow all of that, and I'm sure, I personally feel that we're going to get through this by hopefully by next year. This time, things will settle down. The thing that actually I get happy with is looking at the recovery rates, because that's quite a high at the moment as well. I mean, just over 348,000 or something that have recovered. So that's good news. That is good news. That's positive news that this thing is, people are recovering. They're getting it, but they're recovering.
Absolutely. And there are some people that even actually go onto ventilators and they do recover afterwards.
Yes.
So, we have the stories of people on ventilators and then, it's over. But actually it's not the case. There are a lot of people that even have been on that have come off it. So I think, looking at that, looking at what we spoke about before, by looking at the total number is rising because they tested more people, so the number's going to rise. That just makes common sense, right? We need to remember that there is a certain number, a limited number of hospital beds available. And so while they keep saying we're reaching the peak, we need to understand still that we have to take all the precautions, as you said just now, so that we stay out of those hospitals, out of needing those hospital beds, if you get what I mean, right? We need to remember that many people are recovering, right? And we need to remember that there's no way of predicting which way it's going to go. So the best is to be safe, to stay safe, to follow all the procedures and protocols, irrespective. So that is basically the message I wanted to get through today, was that we're going to get there, as you said. We're going to get through this thing. There's no doubt about it, But we need to stay calm. We need to make educated decisions, and we need to follow through on those. That is the basic principle that we need to remember.
Fantastic. Doctor, we've come to the end of tonight's discussion. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, as always. Thank you so much for breaking down the numbers, giving me a better understanding, a clearer picture of what's happening with this whole COVID-19. As you said, just be precautious, protect you and your family, and things will eventually we'll get through this. We always, it'll always happen. We had the Spanish flu, we got through that. We had SARS, we got through that. Okay, people are going through SARS at the moment. I don't know how good that's working out for you. The other SARS I'm talking about.
But that SARS is another story.
That's another story. That's another story all on its own. But we'll eventually get through this. We just got to be positive, and I know that, with your advice and, people will think better and move forward better in terms of fighting this COVID-19. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Dees, one more thing I'd like to just end the show with. I don't often quote Trump.
Please do.
But here's one. He says, when you test, you have a case. When you test, you find something is wrong with people. If we didn't do any testing, we would have very few cases.
Wow. Okay.
That is thinking along the lines of our steps.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Doctor. It's been a pleasure having you on the show tonight. Have a wonderful evening. I look forward to next Monday on Monday Motivation with you.
Absolutely excellent. Thanks, Dees. Take care and love to everybody.
Okay, good night. There we go. Dr. Sherona Rawat on the Monday Motivation, breaking down the numbers, giving a better understanding. Hopefully it's given you an understanding as well. Thank you for tuning in to the Night Cafe tonight. It's just gone 9:28 p.m. around the country.